There are a few things I want to talk about today. I want to revisit some old friends. I want to talk about robots. I also want to talk about Grokipedia, the awesome, the first right-wing wiki website ever that's ever been made. No one's ever done one before. So, Josh, do you feel kind of like an idiot now that the main authoritative, democratically derived source of truth that we can all sort of share is probably one of the greatest achievements of the 21st century has basically just become Tucker Carlson?
Yeah, no, I feel really stupid that, you know, I, for a very long time, was like, oh, consensus reality and agreeing on things based on research and citations and things like that. That's good, and that's how the world should exist. But the reality is, yeah, we've moved past the need for that, and it should all be automated by a large language model that is sort of prompted by the world's stupidest man. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I think also it's great that it's like, and if you look up like, hey, what happened with George Floyd? It'll be like, he was a drug addict, he deserved to die. And then they're like, finally, someone's telling the whole truth, which to them is like basically justifying whatever. Anything. It's like, look, the best way to think about conservative thought, right, if it can be called such a thing, is that it is supposed to be a soft play area for any prejudice that you might have, which means that if you're looking up George Floyd, the Grokipedia knows that why you're doing it is because you're, I don't know, the reason I've seen some screenshots of it, this is one of the ones I saw, but the reason you're doing that is because your, you know, shit ass nephew has just like, you know, brought up like, hey, maybe the police shouldn't have killed that guy 5 years ago. And you need to go and have yourself reassured. That no, it was right that they did it because he was dangerous. I
mean, to sort of drop the jokey, haha, fun tone, I am looking at the Grokipedia article about George Floyd, which I had not done up until just now. This is fucking revolting. This is absolutely disgusting. This is one of the worst things I've seen in a bit. Like, it kicks off by saying George Perry Floyd Jr. was an American man with a lengthy criminal record, including convictions for armed robbery, drug possession, and theft in Texas from 1997 to 2007. That is the leading sentence.
It's like, hey, this guy died, but it was fine.
It doesn't even include the fact that he died in the first sentence. That's the most, unfortunately, the most notable thing about him in terms of his impact on the world is the way in which he was fucking murdered.
And then, right, when they say, oh, he died, but also contributory factors included severe hypertensive, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, fentanyl intoxication, and a recent methamphetamine use, and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah, man, what if his neck just did that? Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, basically, it's like I say, it's a soft play area for justifications of the less humanity of other people, right? It's a soft play area where every time you like jump on the trampoline, it directly hits someone who is strapped to underneath the trampoline, basically. Yeah, or, you know, the same thing if you look at the January 6th riots, the same thing if you look at like the immigration emergency in the UK, which we'll get to in a second. And you know, now that exists. And so it's the continued bifurcation of reality between, you know, basically fascists and everyone else. And there it is. And Elon's built his big, like, methane fueled large language model, you know, Wikipedia copy paste that just like inserts whatever, you know, like whatever, like Facebook opinion into Wikipedia articles that it can find.
Well, and the utility of something like this is that, yes, it's to provide a counterpoint to Wikipedia, and it's something that appears to be a more authoritative source. But the thing that's also remarkable about it, of course, is that compared to the output of a typical large language model where you never know what you're going to get, this is setting specific prompts in stone so that it is, in fact, consistent when you access across multiple different things at multiple different times. And that makes it a more durable way to reshape language and reshape reality. Because obviously the way that more and more of the internet works is that because it is increasingly powered by large language models, those sources are going to be scraping other sources, and it's going to make it more probabilistically likely that when you search for instance, the January 6th United States Capitol attack, it will say that, you know, I'm just like looking here at what it says. After unauthorized occupation of areas, including the Senate chamber, most carried no firearms, and the incursion was cleared within hours, allowing certification to resume that evening.
So it basically was like not a big deal.
It was pretty chill.
Yeah, why even worry about America's beer hall put? So then when I think about this in context, of course, I also think about like, what is Elon politically doing right now? Elon has resumed again, he talks about predicting a civil war in the UK, but anytime an American commentator looks at the UK and quote unquote predicts a civil war, what they're actually doing is they're saying, ooh, I hope there's a civil war in the UK because I'm imagining a kind of, version of the Crusades, basically, but that they don't have to like leave their town.
Right. Yeah. There is something nice about a war for civilization, quote unquote, where its impacts will not potentially reach you directly. And he's really, really been talking a lot about Tommy Robinson lately.
Oh, yeah. He says, when Tolkien wrote about the hobbits, he was referring to the gentlefolk of English shires who don't realize the horrors that take place far away. They want to live their lives in peace and tranquility, but only because they were protected by the hard men of Gondor. What happened to that nice man who was murdered while walking his dog will happen to all of England if the tide of illegal immigration is not turned. It is time for the English to ally with the hard men like Tommy Robinson and fight for their survival, or they shall surely all die. So yeah, again, it's like, hey, and again, if you ask most people, right, like I'll give an example, right? A woman called into Julia Hartley Brewer's show being like, I personally know 4 people in London who've been murdered. And it's like 70 people were murdered in London last year. 70
Absolutely.
people.
And I saw the baby and it looked at me.
Yeah, and the baby looked at me. And also the baby was an illegal immigrant and the baby murdered me.
Right.
I was murdered by an illegal baby. And now I've called Julia Hartley Brewer and I'm sort of complaining about it on Talk TV. But really, if you get down to the bottom of it, I think Sarah Pochin, the Reform, or Poshin or whatever, the Reform MP, who's recently again been in the news for being like, hey, my main problem is that TV adverts are full of Black and Asian people. And because it's like the demographics of advertising are super important. We need to see British ads for British people. I want the John Lewis ad to feature all white people sitting around at Christmas, and they call it Christmas and they say Merry Christmas because these are ultimately, like we always say, these are people who are getting mad at stuff on their screens. Most of these people don't know any immigrants. Most of these people don't live in fucking London. Most of these people it's nothing. And yet they're all just talking to one another, and Elon Musk is looking at them talking to each other. And soon they're going to be able to go to Grokipedia and they're going to be able to ground all these crazy beliefs, not in the kind of, I don't know, swirling morass of just like posts that reference posts where they saw someone else posting, or like radio call-in show drama. But this is like, I think, a foundational text of, or it could be a foundational text of a sort of different version of consensus reality that doesn't rely on posts and articles and news stories and stuff that they can then look at, where it's like, oh yeah, well, crime by race in the United Kingdom is super important. The grooming gangs inquiry is super important. The police, of course, weren't involved at all. It was all like scary immigrants, and so I see these things like I see so many things as fundamentally related. I see these things as fundamentally related. Complaining about advertisements, calling into Julia Hartley Brewer, saying you've been murdered. The Grokipedia article that says that reminds you of all the drugs that George Floyd was on when he was murdered by the police. And it is quite alarming, I suppose. It is also funny, of course, that Elon Musk is saying that the hard man, Tommy Robinson, who's a very small fake hooligan, is the person who you need to turn to.
Yeah, I looked up the Grokipedia. Fucking hell.
I looked up the Grokipedia. It said I made a very nice ballroom.
Tommy Robinson. The opening paragraph, I think, is like very interesting in terms of like what it tells us about what this thing is. So it says that Stephen Yaxley Lennon, better known in the pseudonym Tommy Robinson, is a British activist and citizen journalist primarily recognized for founding the English Defence League and advocating against Islamist extremism and organised child sexual exploitation networks in the United Kingdom.
Oh, that's what
he's known for, Riley.
Oh, crazy.
I would maybe do the other thing, but like also the other thing is like this page is massive, like compared to like other things.
All of them are.
Really? Okay, because I sort of assume that like the special interest stuff for like X users, for example.
No.
Like,
all of them are way too long, and that's because the way these are spat out largely by large language models, and they are always way too long. Everything they put out is way too long.
Yeah. Because it also just like I think the point about just like kind of letting the LLM kind of run wild, but it's like sort of putting enough guardrails in there to be able to sort of like craft a narrative, like, and also like, bearing in mind like the things that people read, like it's very, the idea that like, people will sort of kind of only read the first few paragraphs. The first few paragraphs have then become very, very important. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like whether this is like influential or beats Wikipedia or not is like sort of a secondary question to the fact that like what this really operates as is like a system that like organizes various disparate conspiracy theories into something kind of seemingly on this like superficially coherent